Hi, and welcome to today's STEM at Home. My name is Olivia, and I work for PGCMLS. One of the things I do there, and one of my favorite parts of the job, is bringing 3D printing to our staff and patrons. So if you've been around our library or a lot of the other libraries in Maryland, you've probably heard of 3D printing and you might have seen a 3D printer in action. But if you haven't gotten up close and personal, you might kind of be fuzzy on what 3D printing actually is or what it is actually good for. So today I'm going to explain how a 3D printer works and what we use it for in the library, and also what it can be used for outside of the library in fashion, technology, medicine, architecture, and all sorts of different uses. And after that, I'm going to show you guys a quick activity that you can do to begin the steps of designing your own 3D print. So this project, all you need is paper, a pen, and objects you find around the house. It's not on the computer, but it is a really awesome first step in learning how to design 3D prints and how to move objects in a 3D space. So let's start with what 3D printing is and how a 3D printer does what it does. When you think about a printer, what do you imagine? You probably think about a two-dimensional printer that prints images or text off of a computer. So when you have a piece of paper coming out of a printer, say this is the printer, this is the paper, there's a little part called the head that moves back and forth, makes that zipping printer sound you might know, and it deposits ink on different parts of the paper when it comes out. So 3D printer has some things that are similar to that and some things that are a little different. It also has a head that moves back and forth that deposits material to make not an image, but a physical object. Instead of ink, it uses filament. This is filament. This is the kind we use at the library, and this is plastic. It's made out of corn, and it's biodegradable. So it's not super duper strong, but it is good for the environment, recyclable, and it is not toxic. That's why we like to use it at the library. I like to explain 3D printers as basically a very high-tech glue gun. The filament goes into a head, just like the printer we talked about earlier that uses ink. The head moves around starting from the print bed, which is the bottom of the 3D printer, and deposits the melted filament in layers. It moves up after it does each layer, and that's how it creates a three-dimensional shape. If you look at this image, you can see little lines on the robot. Those lines are the layers. Think about this as a big stack of plastic pancakes. That print head moves back and forth on two axes, from front to back and side to side, and the print bed moves down, allowing it to deposit yet another layer of plastic pancake to make this object. So now that you know what 3D printing is and a little bit about how it works, you might be asking yourself, what is 3D printing actually used for? Well, to answer that question, I just want to take a step back. Let's think about the two-dimensional printer that prints on paper that we were talking about earlier. In order to have a printed out piece of paper with something on it, you have to start with that information on the computer. That could be a picture or a website or some text, but it has to be something that comes from the computer and has already been created. The same is true for 3D printing. The kind of information that a 3D printer uses to make a 3D print is called a 3D model. A 3D model is basically a file that has information about an object in 3 dimensions. So it has information about height, length, and volume. It can be as simple as a cube or as complicated as something like this. 3D modeling, or the process of creating and designing 3D models, is used in many careers and fields of research. This includes film, architecture, web development, game design, engineering, medicine, fashion, and the list goes on and on. 3D printing is also being incorporated into how these different fields use 3D design. Basically, no matter what subject or field you're interested in, I can bet that 3D models and 3D design has something to do with it. 3D printing is a newer technology than 3D modeling itself, so we're still seeing how it can influence these different fields. It's also just really fun. It's a great way to get your feet wet and experiment with digital design and bring skills that you might have from other computer-based activities like gaming to something creative. Websites like Thingiverse allow designers and hobbyists to share models that they've created for free with people around the world. Anyone can log in, download them, and print them themselves if they have a 3D printer. But what if you can't find what you're looking for online? Or what if you just want to create something yourself? Well, luckily we have Tinkercad. Tinkercad is an awesome free online software that allows you to design your own 3D models. I think of Tinkercad as basically like blocks, but on the computer. If you're familiar with games like Minecraft or Roblox, these tools might look pretty familiar. Basically, you take shapes, you can put them on a plane, and manipulate them to create objects. You can stack them, and you can even use a tool called holes to make holes in them. You can use these two tools together to make pretty much anything you desire. So Tinkercad is awesome. It's available for free, and they have great tutorials on their website, and there are also great tutorials available on Lynda, which is available for free with your library card. I'll put the links at the end of the video so you can check it out. But one of the problems with using Tinkercad is it can be a little overwhelming. Sometimes when I'm trying to figure out how to create an object that I want to 3D print, I have a hard time just jumping right in and using the tools available on Tinkercad. It's kind of hard to rotate a 3D object and figure out where everything needs to go. Sometimes I can't figure out what the right shapes are. So I've come up with a little activity that I do before I 3D model. And all I need is a piece of paper and a pen. And what I'm going to do is show you how to identify 3D shapes in objects, both simple and complicated, to help make a layout of what you would want a 3D model before you create it. And we're going to have our friend here give us a hand. Okay, so with my little friend here, I can already see a couple of sphere-like shapes, maybe a little bit squished. So we can start with, I'm going to start with that head. Looks pretty much like a sphere. Let's turn her around and see what the other side looks like. Sorry, buddy. Yep. Looks like a sphere to me. And then there's a sphere on top of her head. I think I'll leave that bow out for now. Let's get the big shapes first. The head is flat except for a little bump on the nose. That looks like a half circle to me. So from this angle it's going to look like a circle. But from the side, it'll be a half circle. And then looks like we have a sphere for the body. I would say spheres for the hands. And maybe cylinders for the arms. They are a little floppy, but since what we print is going to be rigid, I'm going to want to substitute a shape that's similar to that. Maybe even a cone would be better. Okay. And then for the feet, they do look like a sphere from some angles, but they're a little flat on the bottom. So you know what? I think that might also be a half circle. And the legs look a little more, you know what? Let's do cones for those as well, because I think that'll get a kind of cute shape. Then from the side, I think I'll leave the tail out for now as well. And then this is the half circle. So that might not look as cute as my friend here, but I think I did a pretty good job of identifying the major shapes that her body is made of. So now that we know how to use shapes in 3D design, let's talk about the second part, holes. So like I said, shapes and holes are the building blocks of 3D design. We know what shapes are, but what are holes? So holes in 3D modeling are basically shapes, but made of negative space. So what does that mean? It means that holes are shapes that can be used to cut other shapes. So I'm just going to use this as a an example here. This is my filament. So what is the shape of this filament holder? It's kind of a flat cylinder. But if I draw that, it doesn't really capture what's going on in the middle here, hole. So what shape is this hole? It kind of looks like a smaller cylinder. So here I have my big cylinder, my smaller cylinder, and I'm going to draw the smaller cylinder with a different color inside the bigger one. And we'll do some X-ray vision here. Let's get that from a top view also. And from the side. So from the side, you can't see the hole. You just have basically a cylinder, like that. From the top, you can see all the way down. So I'll draw that hole shape just like that. So that gives you kind of an idea of what holes are and how we can use them in 3D modeling. So let's try one more design that has multiple shapes and multiple holes. So I have this mug. So we can tell from the start that we're going to be using that cylinder shape again. And I'm kind of thinking this arm, ignoring the hole in it, I'm going to add the holes later, I kind of think it could be a really flat half cylinder, kind of like a half circle shape. I like that. to draw it on here a little simpler. But I know what that is, the half cylinder. So this kind of looks like my mug, but I probably can't put any coffee in it. So we're going to utilize the holes that we learned about just a minute ago. So it looks like the hole here is pretty much the same shape as the cup. So we're going to have another cylinder. Draw that in. We'll use our X-ray vision again. And how are we going to handle this handle? It looks like, again, that hole is pretty much the same shape as the handle, but just a little smaller. So I think we can use that half cylinder again. And stick it right in the handle there. And let's draw this from the top. From the top it looks like you won't be able to see the hole in the handle. You will be able to see the hole in the cup. All right. So with 2 holes and 2 shapes, we were able to successfully design this cup. So we've taken some objects from the real world, taken a closer look, identified shapes that are involved in them, rotated them around to see them at different angles, and mapped out what they'd look like if we 3D modeled them. That means that now I'll have a much easier time if I decide to build them in Tinkercad. You can take the same skills that you learned today in this exercise and apply them to objects that you might not have in person. Take a look at photographs of things that are similar to what you want to make, or try drawing out the object that you want to model before you do it. You can do the same thing and identify more basic shapes and break down your drawing that way. If you enjoy 3D modeling and want to learn more about how a 3D model can become a 3D print, visit us at pgcmls.info and click 3D printing under our services menu. PGCMLS offers 3D printing for patrons, including curbside pickup at all the branches that offers curbside. There is a small cost associated with 3D printing, so we require that you be 18 or older to submit a 3D print, or that you have your parents' permission to do so. To submit a 3D print, just click Submit a 3D Print Request, and you can either link to a Thingiverse object that you've found online, or you can upload your own object. Once you send us a message, we'll contact you and schedule your print for creation. Scroll to the bottom of the website to learn more about 3D printing. You can visit NASA, Smithsonian, or Thingiverse, like we mentioned before, to print free open source models. Or you can learn more about Tinkercad and other more complicated design tools. Thanks so much for joining me for this week's STEM at Home. I hope you had fun and you learned a little bit about 3D modeling, 3D printing, and how to get involved with both. Again, if you'd like to put some of your skills from today's activity to the test, I recommend you check out tinkercad.com to use that free modeling software that I showed you earlier. You can also visit thingiverse.com
to see those open source models designed by other people, download them, or just browse them for inspiration. And you can visit our website at pgcmls.info to learn about 3D printing with us and access more resources. We hope that you have a beautiful weekend, and we hope to see you soon.